Okay, we're back. Uh, what does a witch have to gain? What is the purpose of stripping away the faith of a Christian? Well, what is a witch? A witch is basically a very staunch Christian in his beginning state, and he is a seeker and lover of God. He is a devout in his studies. A witch is usually somebody very educated, very smart. A witch, contrary to what you were given over the years on TV and fictional stories, does not fly around on brooms, does not care to fly around on brooms, and does not live in some wooded house, unbathing and unclean and boiling frogs and so forth in pots. A witch is basically a very educated spiritual seeker. Well, what happens to somebody when they seek God and they seek God with a less than strong love for Jesus Christ? Well, the strong seeking brings you into these matters of history, brings you into the truth of the flesh, I like to call it, which is a tool by the devil, because the devil owns this world. He's the Lord of this world. So naturally anything that the flesh eyes can see and so forth are going to be tainted by his truth. The truth we're trying to get to, or we all say we're trying to get to, is the Spirit of God. We're trying to get from this place out of this place into the next place, which is the spiritual realm, which cannot be touched by this realm. And then, so that spiritual truth is far different from the spiritual truth that the flesh has. Well, a witch comes to this knowledge, I call it, and it makes me think I just read where Saul in Ecclesiastes he made a remark about too much knowledge is not a good thing. I get the feeling in Saul, in that book, not Saul, excuse me, but Solomon. I get the feeling that Solomon was, he was kind of depressed, kind of, like he kept saying it, it's all for naught, man. Even all the good things you do, it's like we can't rise to this state we need to be with God, because we just, as long as we're in the flesh, it's all for vain. And that's true. No matter what you learn about God, and no matter what you know and understand about God while you're in the flesh, it's still got a film of flesh on it. So, and you're still eligible. I'm not going to say eligible, because it's really stronger than that, but you're still liable to be corrupted by the truth of the flesh. So anyway, these witches, these people who love God and study very hard, they come across the knowledges we just talked about in the colleges, mostly states of higher education and learning, and they got to deal with this. They're reading that this guy looks just like Jesus. This was from Horus and Isis and Ra and all these guys from way back before Jesus' time. And then we go on to the Greek studies, where they got just oodles and oodles of all these figures down through history that looked and behaved and acted and had the same numbers of figures, born on December 25th, blah blah blah. It goes on and on and on, just like Jesus was. Not to say that Jesus was born on 25th, but because he wasn't, but that's another issue. But it's a celebrated day birth of Jesus was December 25th. Why? Because it's a pagan thing. So now they're wrapped up in this, and now if they're a lover of the truth, which is who their God is, and Jesus himself tells you that he's truth, and if you're going to be a seeker of truth, you're going to have to look on into this stuff. Now you have to let go of your childish faith and belief in Jesus Christ, the things that you learned when you were young, and you only had this little pitiful thing called obedience. Because all you really had was obedience. And then now that you've got knowledge, we can lay the obedience down by the stump of the tree you just cut down, and now we can move on to being knowledgeable. You see, we have to leave obedience to become knowledgeable. That's the way it works with everything in life. So a witch has cut down the tree of life, and he has left the stump, and now he is walking around with a big armful of knowledge, who knowledge becomes his God now, because therein lies is where he finds his truth. Now, a witch is a funny thing, and he really feels sorry for you, and he remembers the pains and to's and fro's that he had to go through in his life to find his truth about who God was and who Jesus really was. And he knows that as long as you are high on obedience, his faith in Jesus Christ, there's a strange power over you that he understands now more than you do, because he's got knowledge after all. So the guy is going to help you, because he's a decent guy. He's not all black and calling on evil and so forth like the TVs and all says that a witch is. But he needs to help you now, and he needs to elevate you from this state of disgusting obedience, as he sees it in his eyes now, that he's educated out of it, and he needs to get you on board. So one thing a witch is always going to be is never happy to be alone. Same thing that a homosexual is never happy being the only one in a small town that's a homosexual. There's a feeling of isolation, of alienation. There's a feeling of aloneness that is not acceptable in the human condition. The last thing that people want to be, I don't give a damn what some hermits may tell you, is the last thing they want to be is alone. People don't mind being in hell, but they're scared to death of being in hell alone. So they want to educate you to make more of themselves, to get you on board. Because if you're on a boat in this vast sea, and if there's people in the water that you came out of and climbed on this board, naturally you want to help that person pull him out of that sea into your boat, so you won't be alone. You don't want to be the only one floating around on top of the peoples of these many waters. So you want to put them on board naturally. Okay, so we got all these well-intentioned witches floating around there today. The only problem is that the thing that they want to educate you to is that the whole Jesus story is a crock of shit, and their story of how Jesus came to be is the truth. Well, that can make for a dangerous thing. Well, now let's take a look at faith, how it works. Let's take a look at obedience. God seems to be pretty funny stickler about obedience all through the book. Now, you know, if smart was what God was after, God could just build his vast network of computers and he could have all the smart he wanted. God does not seem to be after smartness in what he's after. God seems to be after obedience, because it's through obedience that we can accept Christ, therefore we can obtain salvation. We cannot attain salvation by the mere knowledge of Christ, of who he was, of what he did. The knowledge of Christ, people wipe their butt with every day. Doesn't mean anything if you don't believe in Christ, if you don't love Christ. That salvation does nothing for you. It just leaves you by the stump. So, the witches have a deep-seated need to educate you, to get you to cut down that tree and to take up knowledge. Now, they do this through music, which they've been doing since really earlier than what you think, hundreds of years. But when we first started seeing signs of witchcraft being inducted, you can look at some of the earlier German films from the 20s when media was just taking on its shape, and which media was owned even back then and constructed because it was a form of magic, this imagery, by the occultists. Metropolis would be a good movie for you to look at, and for those signs and hints. You can see the star bone fat and the 13 with a circle, and that's in these older German movies. Why? Because Germany was already there in the early stages with the occult. Hitler himself was wrapped up very steeped in the occult. Look what it done for him, this knowledge, this higher thing. Okay, I guess I'm pretty close to needing to start video 4, and then we're going to touch on that a little bit more about the state of Germany in their quest for this knowledge, the same knowledge we're talking about now that the witches are trying to feed to you the people, to us the people that's watching these YouTubes and zeitgeist movies and so forth, because it's the same exact thing, folks. So I'm going to touch on that, but for now I'm gonna start video 4. Thank you for watching.